My name is Isabella Monroe. I am 23 years old. I live in Chicago. And until last week, my full-time job was not the one listed on my resume. On paper, I was a recent college graduate and a part-time barista working early shifts near campus. In reality, I was something else entirely. I was the emergency plan, the backup parent, the invisible glue holding a family together while everyone else pretended balance came naturally to them. I did not realize how replaceable I was until the moment my future disappeared into a toilet bowl. I was standing in the hallway of my parents' house, barefoot on cold tile, flipping my passport open and closed like a nervous habit. My picture stared back at me, hair pulled neatly behind my ears, eyes tired but hopeful. That little Navy book felt heavier than paper. It held every late-night shift, every exam taken on too little sleep, every sacrifice I told myself would be worth it one day. Italy was no longer just a dream. It was booked, paid for, real. Rome, Venice, the coast. My first time leaving the country. My first time choosing something that belonged only to me. Then my sister stepped out of the bathroom. Megan did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She did not ask. She simply reached out, ripped the passport from my hands, and before I could even understand what was happening, she tore it straight down the middle. The sound was sharp, final, like a door slamming shut. She walked back into the bathroom and dropped the pieces into the toilet. I watched, frozen, as she pressed the flush handle with slow, deliberate pressure. The water spun. The paper dissolved. Months of planning vanished in seconds. "There is no trip," she said calmly. "Your job is staying home with my kid." From down the hallway, my mother did not even bother to show her face. "Exactly," she called out. "You should stay. Family comes first." I heard laughter, actual laughter, from the living room, like this was entertainment, like my life had just been reduced to a punchline. That was the moment I understood something with terrifying clarity. To them, I was not a daughter who had just graduated. I was not a sister with her own future. I was unpaid labor that had forgotten her place. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not beg. I stood there long enough to feel the cold sink into my feet, long enough to memorize the smug curve of Megan's mouth, long enough to hear the faint mechanical hum of the security camera my dad had installed at the end of the hall. A tiny red light blinking, watching everything. Then I turned around and walked away. They thought that was me giving up. They had no idea. That was the exact moment everything began to collapse. Before Italy, before the passport, before the toilet flush that changed everything, my life looked quiet from the outside. Ordinary. Safe. I was the younger sister who had moved back home to finish her degree. The responsible one. The convenient one. Megan was 6 years older than me, married, a mother. Her son Oliver was 4 years old and adored by everyone, especially by the people who never seemed to be the ones watching him. At first, helping out felt temporary. A couple afternoons here and there, then weekends, then nights. Then every plan I made came with an invisible asterisk. As long as nothing came up, as long as Megan did not need me, as long as family came first. It always did. By the time I realized babysitting had become my unpaid obligation instead of a favor, the baby monitor was already installed in my bedroom. The diaper bag lived in the hallway. Cartoons played in the background like white noise. My life rearranged itself quietly around someone else's needs. And every time I hesitated, every time I tried to say no, I was reminded where I lived, what I owed, how lucky I was. You do not pay rent. You are home anyway. Do you know how hard motherhood is? Those phrases built the cage long before the door ever slammed shut. Italy was supposed to be my first breath outside it. Standing in that hallway, watching my passport vanish, I realized something else too. They did not just want me to stay. They wanted to make sure I could not leave. What they did not know, what none of them had considered in their confidence, was that the same house they used to control me was quietly recording everything, and that small red blinking light at the end of the hall was about to become the one thing they could not talk their way out of. My name is Isabella Monroe. I am 23 years old. I live in Chicago, in a narrow brick house that always carries the faint smell of laundry detergent and burnt coffee. I work part-time as a barista near my university, pouring latte after latte for people rushing to jobs they secretly hate, while quietly telling myself that this is only temporary, that everything I have endured is leading me somewhere. What my family has never written on my resume is that, for the past 4 years, my real job has been something entirely different. I was the solution. I was the backup plan, the one they called when schedules collapsed, when plans changed, when someone needed saving at the last minute. I was the person who stayed so that everyone else could leave. And until last week, I believed that was just what being a good daughter and a good sister meant. I stopped believing that the moment my passport was torn in half and flushed down a toilet by my own blood. I had just finished packing. My suitcase sat open on my bed, clothes folded with the kind of care you only use when something matters too much to mess up. Summer dresses, comfortable walking shoes, a small adapter I bought online after reading too many travel blogs. Everything was ready. Italy was no longer an idea or a someday fantasy. It was real. It was paid for. My flight confirmations sat in my email inbox like proof that I was allowed to want something for myself. Rome, Venice, the coast, late nights walking streets I could not pronounce, gelato melting too fast in the heat, a version of myself that did not revolve around nap schedules, diaper bags, or last-minute emergencies. I was standing in the hallway, barefoot on cold tile, flipping my passport open and closed while I waited for the laundry to finish. My picture stared back at me, dark circles under my eyes, a tight smile that looked hopeful despite everything. That little navy book felt heavier than paper. It held my grandmother's graduation money. It held months of saving every spare dollar from my part-time job. It held every time I said yes when I wanted to say no, telling myself freedom would come later. I did not hear my sister coming. Megan stepped out of the bathroom and blocked my path without saying a word. She was already irritated, already wound tight, like she had made a decision long before I ever walked into that hallway. Before I could ask what she was doing, her hand shot out and ripped the passport from my fingers. "What are you doing?" I asked, reaching for it. She held it just out of reach, eyes flat and cold. "Not angry, not emotional. Certain. Making sure you remember your place," she said. Then she bent the passport and tore it straight down the middle. The sound was ugly, sharp, final. I felt it in my chest before my brain could catch up. She turned, walked back into the bathroom, and dropped the pieces into the toilet like they were scraps of junk mail. She did not hesitate. She did not look back. I stood there, frozen, as she pressed the flush handle with one slow, deliberate push. The water roared. The paper swirled. My future went in circles and disappeared. "There is no trip," she said quietly, turning back toward me. A small smirk tugged at her mouth. "Your job is staying home with my kid." From down the hall, my mother did not even bother to come see what was happening. "Exactly," she called out, her voice calm, almost bored. "You should stay. Family comes first." Somewhere in the living room, I heard laughter. A couple of short, careless bursts, like someone had just told a joke I was not in on. I stood there on the cold tile, my suitcase half-zipped in my room, my flight to Italy already paid for, realizing that to them, I was not a grown woman who had just graduated. I was free babysitting that tried to escape. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not beg. I felt something inside me go very still. I noticed details instead. The faint hum of the dryer, the chipped paint near the baseboard, the tiny red light blinking at the end of the hallway from the cheap security camera my dad had installed after a break-in down the street. Watching everything, recording everything. Then I turned and walked away. They thought that meant they had won. They had no idea that was the exact moment everything started to fall apart for them. To understand how we got to a toilet and a flush, you have to understand what my life looked like long before Italy was even an option. I am the younger sister, the one who moved back home to finish her degree because it was practical, because it made sense, because family helps family. Megan is 6 years older than me, married, a mother to a 4-year-old son named Oliver, who everyone calls Ollie. When she had him, I thought I was helping out occasionally. A few afternoons so she could nap, a couple evenings so she could run errands. Then occasionally turned into regularly. Regularly turned into expected. Expected turned into mandatory. Megan would show up already dressed for dinner, shove Ollie's backpack into my arms, and say things like, "You are home anyway. It is not a big deal. You know how tired I am." If I mentioned a paper due or an early exam, she would roll her eyes. "Sisters help each other," she would say. "Do you think motherhood is easy?" My mom worked nights as a nurse. My dad drove trucks for years before moving into dispatch. They were tired. It was easier to let me handle it, easier to believe I did not mind. The baby monitor appeared in my room without a conversation. The diaper bag took permanent residence in the hallway. Cartoons became background noise to my life. I missed birthdays. I skipped study groups. I canceled dates because at the last minute, Megan would text. Something came up. Can you watch him? I will owe you. She never did. By the time Italy entered my life, my freedom had already been quietly negotiated away without my consent. And the moment I finally tried to take it back, they decided to destroy it instead. What they did not realize was that control only works when someone is willing to stay silent. And I did not leave that house with a plan. I left with a backpack, a phone at 3% battery, and a single clear thought pounding in my head. I was not staying one more second. The evening air slapped my face as I stepped onto the porch. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the cracked concrete steps I had walked up and down for years. Behind me, the front door stayed closed. No one followed. No one called my name. That hurt more than the passport. I walked until my legs started to shake. Down the block, past houses that all looked the same, past porch lights flicking on one by one as families settled into their routines. I reached the bus stop at the end of the street and finally sat down, my backpack heavy on my lap, my hands trembling like they were not fully attached to my body. That was when the shock wore off and the anger rushed in. It hit hard, fast, hot. I replayed Megan's face, the calm in her voice, the way she had flushed my future without hesitation, the way my mother had backed her up without even bothering to look me in the eye. Family comes first. I had heard that sentence my entire life. It was never said gently. It was never offered like comfort. It was used like a command, like a debt I could never fully repay. My phone buzzed. A text from Megan. You are being dramatic. Come back inside. We will talk when you calm down. I laughed out loud, the sound sharp and ugly in the quiet street. Calm down. That was always the script. Whenever I pushed back, whenever I tried to explain how tired I was, how overwhelmed I felt, how invisible my life had become, the problem was never what they did. The problem was my reaction to it. I did not reply. Instead, I opened my contacts and called Tessa. She answered on the second ring. Hey, are you home? We were just sending... What would you do? I interrupted, my voice shaking. If someone ripped up your passport and flushed it down the toilet. There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. What happened? She asked. I told her everything in one breathless rush. The dinner, the argument, the hallway, the tear, the flush. By the time I finished, my chest hurt like I had been running. That is not just messed up, she said slowly. Isabella, that is illegal. The word illegal landed differently than everything else. Not dramatic, not emotional, not selfish. Illegal. You need to come here, she continued. Right now. I rode the bus across the city with my backpack clutched to my chest, watching the familiar streets blur past the window. The city felt bigger than it ever had before, less like a cage, more like an exit. At Tessa's apartment, she handed me a mug of tea and made me sit on her couch while I went through the story again, slower this time. When I mentioned the security camera at the end of the hallway, the tiny red light, blinking during the whole thing, she sat up straight. Wait, she said. You have cameras in the house? Yeah, I said. My dad installed them a few months ago. I have the app. Her eyes locked onto mine. Isabella, she said carefully, your sister destroyed a federal document on purpose, and you have video proof. My stomach twisted. I had been raised to keep the peace, to not air family business, to swallow anger and call it maturity. Calling the police on my own sister felt unthinkable. But then I remembered Megan's smirk. Grow up. You live here. I opened the app with shaking fingers and scrubbed back through the footage. There it was, grainy, wide angle, undeniable. Me walking down the hall, Megan stepping out, her hand snapping forward. The tear, the flush. Watching it from the outside made something click. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not stress. This was control. I dialed the non-emergency number. The next afternoon, I stood on my parents' porch with a uniformed officer beside me. The house looked smaller than I remembered, less powerful. My dad opened the door, confusion flashing across his face when he saw the badge. What is going on? He asked. The officer explained calmly, professionally, asked if we could step inside to view the footage. My mom appeared in the hallway, her face draining of color. Megan came down the stairs a minute later, already defensive. This is ridiculous, she snapped. She is just trying to punish me. I said nothing. I handed the officer my phone. We watched the video in silence. When the toilet flushed, my dad closed his eyes. The officer turned to Megan. Ma'am, do you deny that this is you destroying your sister's passport? She sputtered, claimed it was a joke, said she did not realize it was serious, said I had left it where her kid could get it. None of it matched the footage. This is destruction of property, the officer said evenly. And in this case, a government document. A report will be filed. For the first time, Megan looked scared. After the officer left, the house felt different, smaller, heavier. 10 minutes later, my dad insisted we meet at a diner instead of staying there, somewhere public, somewhere neutral. We sat in a cracked vinyl booth under harsh fluorescent lights. My sister crossed her arms. My mom stared at her napkin. Ethan looked lost. My dad watched the video again on his phone. I let this go on too long, he said quietly. Megan bristled. So what? She gets to run off to Europe while we scramble for childcare? My dad looked at her. Really looked at her. Your responsibility is your son, he said, not your sister's life. When he told her the monthly financial support was stopping, the room went silent. And that money, he said, turning to me, is going to Isabella now. She needs a new passport, new plans, a place to live. I stared at him, stunned. For the first time, the scales shifted, and my sister realized that the system she had relied on her entire life had finally stopped protecting her. She cried. I did not, because for the first time, the guilt was not sitting on my chest. Justice was. The fallout did not come all at once. It came in waves. The first wave hit the morning after the diner. My dad picked me up early, the sky still gray and heavy, and drove me downtown without saying much. We sat in hard plastic chairs at the courthouse, while a clerk stamped papers and slid them across the counter. Like this was just another routine errand. Seeing my name next to words like victim and damaged federal document felt surreal. I kept thinking someone would stop us, that someone would say this was all a misunderstanding, that families did not do this to each other. No one did. With the police report in hand, I scheduled an expedited passport appointment. The clerk warned me it would still take weeks. It would cost more money. Nothing was guaranteed. For the first time in years, uncertainty belonged to me instead of being forced on me. On the drive home, my dad stared out the windshield, knuckles tight around the steering wheel. I should have stopped this earlier, he said finally. I told myself it was temporary, that everyone was just tired. He paused. I was wrong. I did not rush to comfort him. I did not tell him it was okay. I just nodded. Accountability mattered now. The second wave hit my sister. It came in the mail. A formal notice. Fines. Charges. Language that did not care about her stress or her intentions. Words that did not soften themselves for family. She called my dad in a panic, crying so hard she could barely speak. I heard his side of the conversation from the kitchen. You need a lawyer, he said calmly. No, we cannot make this disappear. Yes, it is serious. She had spent years believing rules bent for her. They did not. The third wave was quieter, but heavier. Her job. Megan worked in a management role. Background checks were part of the deal. A police report involving destruction of a government document did not stay hidden for long. HR called her in. She came home that afternoon with a cardboard box full of office junk and a look on her face I had never seen before. Not anger, not entitlement, fear. She was given a choice that was not really a choice. Resign quietly or be terminated once the internal review was complete. She resigned. Losing the $2,000 a month from my parents had already stretched them thin. Losing her salary on top of that cracked something open. Bills did not care about intentions. Mortgages did not pause for family drama. Ethan started picking up extra hours. Side projects. Late nights. His sentences got shorter. His silences got longer. One night he showed up at my parents' house alone. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, filling out job applications, when he knocked softly on the back door. Can we talk? He asked. I made coffee because it was easier than asking him to leave. I did not know she did that, he said after a long pause. If I had known about the passport, I would have stopped it. I believed him. That did not erase the years he watched me absorb the fallout of their convenience. I should have stepped in sooner, he admitted. This is who she becomes when she does not get her way. A month later, he moved into a small apartment closer to his office. They called it a trial separation. Oliver carried his stuffed dinosaur back and forth in a tiny backpack. Too young to understand custody, just old enough to sense something had broken. While their life cracked under its own weight, mine began to take shape quietly. The first transfer from my dad hit my account on a Friday afternoon, $2,000. He texted me a screenshot. This is a reset, not a gift. Use it to get out. I did. I found a tiny studio in Lincoln Park. Nothing fancy. Just a clean room, a window overlooking a tree, and enough space for a bed, a desk, and a secondhand couch. The first night I slept there on an air mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to traffic instead of cartoons. I felt lonely. I felt free. During the day, I sent out writing samples, portfolio links, cover letters that did not mention babysitting or sacrifice. Just skills. Just me. A few weeks later, a mid-size agency downtown emailed me. They liked my work. They wanted an interview. I wore the only blazer I owned, rode the train into the Loop, sat in a glass-walled conference room talking about brand voice and storytelling while my entire past life hummed in the background like static. 2 days later, they offered me the job. It was not glamorous. The pay was modest. The email had my name on it. Mine. When my new passport finally arrived, I stood in my studio holding it without opening it. My hands shook like it might disappear if I blinked. But it did not. Inside was my picture, my name, proof that no one had erased me. I sent a photo to the Italy group chat. The replies exploded. We pushed the trip back a few months. This time I would go on my terms. My mom came to see my place a week later. She stood in the doorway holding grocery bags like an offering. I was wrong, she said quietly. I forgot you were drowning too. She did not defend herself. That mattered. Megan stayed quiet. Sometimes her name appeared on my phone with a missed call. A text. Can we talk? I never meant for it to get this bad. Most of the time, I let it sit. When I finally replied, it was simple. I hope you are getting help. I am not your safety net anymore. 3 months later, I stood in line at O'Hare with my passport in my hand. Nothing dramatic, just real. And for the first time in my life, there was nothing anyone could do to stop me. 3 months later, I stood in line at O'Hare Airport with my new passport in my hand. It felt strange how ordinary the moment looked from the outside. No music swelling, no dramatic speeches, just people shifting their bags forward inch by inch, scrolling on their phones, complaining quietly about delays. But inside my chest, everything was loud. I kept expecting something to go wrong. A call, a text, a last-minute emergency designed to pull me back into a life I had already outgrown. My phone stayed silent. No guilt, no demands, no reminders of what I owed. When the agent finally took my passport, flipped through it, and stamped it with a dull final thump, I felt something settle inside me. I was really going. Tessa waved at me from the check-in queue. Jordan was already filming everything for social media. Malik and Priya were arguing about who would fall asleep first on the plane. They looked the same as they always had, but I felt different standing among them. Lighter, more solid. The flight itself was a blur of bad movies and restless excitement. When we landed in Rome and stepped out into the warm, unfamiliar air, something tightened in my chest in the best possible way. The city felt alive, loud, unapologetic. We ate pasta in tiny restaurants where the menus were only in Italian. We got lost in Venice and did not rush to find our way back. We hiked along cliffs where the sea stretched out so wide it made my old life feel impossibly small. There were moments when my hand twitched toward my phone out of habit, expecting a message asking where I was, asking what time I would be home, asking if I could help. The messages that came instead were different. Photos from my dad of Oliver at the park. A blurry selfie from my coworkers back in Chicago laughing about some inside joke. A text from my mom asking if I had eaten enough. No one told me I was selfish for being there. No one asked me to come back early. One afternoon, sitting on a stone step in Rome with gelato melting down my wrist, Tessa nudged me. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. I thought about the bathroom, the sound of tearing paper, my mother's voice saying family comes first like a warning instead of comfort. I thought about my studio apartment. Quiet. Small. Mine. I regret not saying no sooner, I said. That is it. When I returned to Chicago, the city felt different even though nothing had changed. My studio was still small. My job still demanding. My bank account still unimpressive. But I walked up the stairs to my place with a suitcase full of dirty clothes and a phone full of photos. And I did not feel like I was sneaking back into someone else's life. I felt like I was returning to my own. My mom came over for dinner a few days later. She listened more than she talked. My dad asked to see the passport stamp and joked that maybe one day he would get on a plane too. Megan texted me a picture of Oliver holding a crayon drawing of an airplane with my name scribbled underneath. "He misses you," she wrote. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. I miss him too, I said. But I will not be your built-in babysitter again. If we have a relationship, it has to be one with boundaries. There was a long pause. I know, she finally wrote. I am working on it. I do not know what our relationship will look like in 5 years or 10. Maybe we will rebuild something healthier. Maybe distance will always be part of the cost. What I do know is this: family is not a free pass to break you. Loving someone does not mean letting them use you. Being related to someone does not give them the right to control your future or flush it away when it becomes inconvenient. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is say no and mean it. If you are reading this and you have been told that choosing your own life makes you selfish, hear me clearly. You are allowed to have dreams that do not revolve around other people's comfort. You are allowed to set boundaries and keep them, even when it makes people angry. And if the only way someone knows how to keep you close is by cutting off your escape routes, maybe the bravest thing you can do is step back, rebuild, and learn to leave anyway.